Okay, now with our formality. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I would like to thank Professor Stuart Phillips and Darren Candow for accepting to be part of this examining board. I would like to thank Professor Paulo Bento and Luis Mascarenhas for being present this important date for my career, for the career of my advisee, Luis Boiko Ferreira. I would like to thank everyone virtually present today. Luis, you have 40 minutes to defend your dissertation entitled Effects of 16 Weeks of Eccentric versus Concentric Strength Training with Creatine Supplementation in Older Adults, an essay about physical functionality and frailty. And then the examining board will have 30 minutes each for their questions. Good defense.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the presence of everyone here, especially for the examination board members. I know it's really early in Canada, so I really appreciate the effort to be here today. Today, I will present my thesis with the title Effect of 16 Weeks of Eccentric versus Concentric Strength Training with Creatine Supplementation in Older Adults, an essay about physical function and frailty. My name is Luis Henrique Boiko Ferreira. My advisor is Professor Tácito Pessoa de Souza, Júnior, and my co-advisor is Professor Scott Forbes. I divided my presentation in 3 chapters. In the first chapter, I will talk about the background, justify, objectives, and hypotheses. In the chapter 2, I will elaborate and explain the methods using in my study. Finally, in chapter 3, I will present the results, the discussion, and the final considerations of my thesis. We can start the chapter 1 with the idea that the world population is aging. So according to the chart here, you can see, as proposed by the World Health Organization, that the population in our society are getting older. And from 2050 and above, we are expecting a significant change in the amount of older adults in our society. The main reason that we are observing a higher increase in the amount of older adults, it's related to the reduced fecundity and fertility levels, as well as a good development in the medical and healthcare that is increasing the age expectancy of older populations. So here you can see another image where it's predicted that by 2050, almost all the world will have at least 15% or more of older adults compounding our society. Based on that, we believe that it's important to understand methods and strategies to avoid the deleterious effect associated with aging. Well, okay, so now we know that the world population is aging, but what happened with aging? Observational studies suggest that approximately 1% of total muscle mass is lost every year after the 4th decade of life, with substantial increase in the amount of muscle mass lost after the 50th decade of life. So basically here we have 3 different images. The first one, it's a normal active muscle where you can see the fullness of the muscle belly. However, when we put a condition like inactivity, we can observe a substantial reduction in the loss in the muscle mass, usually associated with atrophy. And when we combine aging and inactivity, those processes are even more pronounced. So we have a condition known as sarcopenia associated to aging and physical inactivity. Here in the last image, you can see like from 25 to 30 years old, we reach something that we can call a peak of our muscle mass. After that, we start to lose muscle mass, and it impacts our life by several ways. Based on that, we must elaborate about two specific conditions. The first one, it's known as sarcopenia, and according to the present study, we can see the consensus and definition about diagnosis of sarcopenia. Here we have three different criteria that must be used to classify sarcopenia. The first one is low muscle strength. The second one, it's low muscle quantity or quality. And the third one, it's low physical performance. The first one, when you just reach the first, it's low muscle strength, it's easily considered as probable sarcopenia. If your diagnosis confirmed by additional documentation of criteria 2, low muscle quantity or quality, you are diagnosed with sarcopenia. If you reach all the three criteria proposed, you are considered severe sarcopenia with severe consequences, like severe sarcopenia. The low muscle strength, it's known as dynapenia as well. Dynapenia is easily associated with sarcopenia. However, sarcopenia it's not always associated with dynapenia. It's just one of the criteria used to classify the sarcopenia. Besides sarcopenia, when we talk about older population, we must consider the frailty phenotype. The frailty phenotype it's divided in three categories. The first one that should not attain any of those 5 conditions, it's considered robust. If you reach 1 or 2 of those conditions, you are considered pre-frail. And if you reach 3 or more, you are considered frail. So the criteria is weakness, evaluated through grip strength, intentional weight loss, analyzed by the weight lost in the past 12 months that must pass 10 pounds or something around 4 to 5 kilograms. Slowness characterized by decreased walking speed, low energy expenditure analyzed by the calories you spend a week through physical activities, and fatigue through self-report. Thus, aging is easily associated with disease and costs that can be direct and indirect related. The first direct costs are usually associated with medical care, transport to medical facilitations. The indirect costs are associated with productivity. And finally, we have intangible costs, usually associated with pain and disability. When we talk about disability, it can be a little bit hard to understand the real impact of that. So here we have the 3 states of our life. In our early life, we are below the disability threshold. So we need people to actually help us to conduct any of our daily activities. During our adult lifetime, we can have a functional capacity to perform anything without the assistance of someone else. And when we don't take care of our health, about our physical capacity and muscle mass, morphology, physiology associated with a good lifestyle, we end up reaching older age, going through the disability threshold. And when you go below the disability threshold, you will need help to conduct any of your daily activities, impacting the quality of life of that population. So with that in mind, we try to understand different methods that could be used to actually enhance our functional capacity and reach an older age with quality of life. Beyond the methods, we can elucidate the physical activity and exercise. It's a global recommendation for health in aging. Thus, strategies aimed to increase the physical activity levels and optimize the adherence have focusing and promoting exercise via lifestyle integration by incorporating it into activities of daily life. Yeah, we know the physical activity is good, but sometimes it's hard to deal with the adherence right now. Consider that physical activity and physical exercise are a good way to avoid the physical disability, another question rises. Which type of exercise should I be being performed? So in the first moment, we can think about the aerobic exercise. It promotes several benefits, and you have to practice that with high intensity to actually reach substantial levels of benefits. Following the aerobic exercise, we have the resistance or strength training, represented by the optimal prescription to treat sarcopenia. And it also might improve balance, as we are really observed in our laboratory. And finally, we have another studies that report the multi-component exercise interventions. And about that, I would like to thank Professor Paulo Bento for the opportunity to understand a little bit more about multi-component exercise in that review and meta-analysis, where we, beyond the multi-component exercise, analyze a different type of exercise, the home-based exercise, which was a great strategy during the pandemic because people could not leave the house to go to a gym, to a training center. So the home-based exercise came to me as a very good strategy to avoid those problems. However, today we are trying to understand a little bit more about the resistance training and the types of resistance training that could be used to actually promote those changes in older population. So with the position statement from the National Strength and Condition Association proposed by Fragala et al. In 2019, it was proposed several different types of intervention that could be used to actually enhance the physical capacity and avoid physical disability in older adults. But one of the main points discussed here was about the type of contractions that could be used to actually reach better results. So concerning to the resistance exercise, the dynamic act of weightlifting could be divided in two different types of muscle actions, contractions and actions, like concentric and eccentric, involving acting of shortening and lengthening the sarcomeres. Basically, the literature is not yet sure about which type of contraction could promote the better gains associated with hypertrophy or even the development of physical function. So we have several studies that affirms that eccentric training is better than concentric training. However, few other studies along the years try to propose the idea that both the eccentric and concentric training have similar effects associated with physical function and development of morphology associated with hypertrophy. So overall, some acute studies demonstrate the superiority of eccentric training compared to concentric training regarding the anabolic response, enhancing the velocity of protein synthesis and gene expression after an acute resistance training session. One of the main reasons for that, it's related to the higher capacity to tolerate load in eccentric training. The other one is the activation of structural and supportive elements that enhance the muscle activation during that type of contraction. And finally, acute signaling of anabolic pathways. However, with that last one, we must take care because acute changes, acute signaling might not reflect in a long-term process that could result in a better hypertrophy result. Besides the resistance training, we also try to understand different approaches that could reduce the effect of aging process. And supplements, more specifically, creatine supplementation seems to be like a good idea. We can say that creatine is probably the winner because people are looking and researching for the effect of creatine along the years, and the research just keep going, and keep going. Creatine, it's a naturally occurring amine, primarily found in the skeletal muscle and synthesized endogenously by the liver, kidneys, and pancreas from the amino acids glycine and arginine. So Here on the right, you can see an adaptation from Professor Darren, where you see the interaction between arginine and glycine with ornithine and guanidine acetic acid that will transform that amino acids into creatine that could be transformed once again in phosphocreatine or creatinine depending on the type of daily activities you're performing. But overall, we can say that enhancing the amount of phosphocreatine that you have available in your body, it's something really useful when you think about physical capacity. Some of the mechanisms related to the benefit effects of creatine were explained by Professor Chilibeck on 2017, where he proposed that the creatine have a direct impact over the AKT-mTOR pathway. So the creatine have the ability to stimulate EGF-1 that triggers several effects inside our body. The first one is related to the activation of AKT and therefore mTOR. It results in a protein translation that in a long term could be transformed or related to muscle hypertrophy. Nevertheless, besides the effect on AKT, we have the inhibition of the FOXO and reactive oxygen species, which reduce the muscle protein breakdown, also affecting the muscle hypertrophy process. So it's just one of the several mechanisms that could be used by the creatine by enhancing the physical performance. In 2021, I had the opportunity to work with Professor Scott Forbes, Professor Darren, in a narrative review where we tried to analyze the effect of creatine supplementation, like isolated creatine supplementation without any type of exercise, on properties of muscle, bone, and brain function in older adults. Overall, we saw that several studies demonstrate some effects on properties of muscle, and several others try to promote or even discuss the brain function associated with creatine supplementation. So in 2020, we also had a study published where we analyzed the effect, the cognitive effect associated with creatine supplementation in older adults. And we saw several important changes happening in many factors that is related to brain function. But overall, the main recommendation, the gold key, is associated with creatine and resistance training, with that being one of the most viable strategies to avoid frailty and disease associated with the aging process. Thus, the general objective of the present study is to compare the effect of 16 weeks of strength training using different types of muscle contraction, concentric versus eccentric, associated with creatine supplementation in anthropometric components, physiological parameters, and physical function of older adults living in a long-term care facilities. I have 5 specific objectives. The first one is to compare the effect of eccentric versus concentric contractions with or without creatine supplementation in anthropometric components of older adults living in long-term care facilities. The second one is to compare the effect of eccentric versus concentric contractions with or without creatine supplementation in physiological parameters of older adults living in a long-term care facility. Third, it's to compare the effect of eccentric versus concentric contractions associated with or without creatine supplementation in tests designed to assess the physical function of older adults in long-term care facilities. The fourth is to analyze the difference between strength training with and without creatine supplementation in anthropometric components, physiological parameters, and physical function of older adults living in long-term care facilities. Finally, my last specific objective is to verify the incidence of frailty pre- and post-intervention in older adults living in a long-term care facility. I have 5 hypotheses for the present thesis. The new hypothesis is that no difference will be observed in anthropometric components, physiological parameters, and physical function between strength training programs composed of eccentric or concentric contractions and control group, without difference between creatine supplementation or placebo. The H1, its eccentric training will be more effective to improve anthropometric components, physiological parameters, and physical function compared to concentric training, being enhanced by creatine supplementation compared to placebo. The H2, it's the eccentric and concentric intervention associated with creatine supplementation will experience more preeminent benefits in anthropometric components, physiological parameters, and physical functions compared to eccentric and concentric protocols without creatine supplementation. The H3, it's just the creatine supplementation without any type of training will not be enough to improve anthropometric components, physiological parameters, and physical function of older adults. Finally, the H4, it's the frailty status will be equally modified by eccentric and concentric training protocols, being enhanced in the groups with exercise and creatine supplementation. So the study characteristic, this is a quasi-experimental double-blind randomized study. And in a quasi-experimental study, the research determines the study object that must be analyzed, observing and selecting the control variables that might impact the study object. The place and context of the study. The subject's recruitment was made by convenience through a sampling approach in the long-term care facility Santa Rita, located in Irati, Paraná. The subjects were evaluated in a presidential meeting where aims and risks related to the study were detailed. We had few inclusion criteria. The first one is that the subjects must be 60 years older or more. Here in Brazil, we consider 60 years or older as older adults. I know it might change depending on the place. Some places is 65. Here in Brazil is 60. Considered physical independent, so he must do everything by himself. Lack of cognitive impairment analyzed through Mini-Mental and MoCA. Living in a long-term care facility for at least 1 year and not being enrolled in any physical exercise program from the previous 6 months. The exclusion criterion, we have physical mobility limitations that could impair the realization of physical training, partial blindness, recent diagnosis of stroke, diagnostic of neurological disease, 2 or more bone fractures in the past year, which is usually associated with severe osteoporosis or chronic kidney disease. To select the subjects, we try to calculate which would be the sample necessary to have the power for our sample. So we use the software G-Power, and after the total sample size calculation, it was predicted that we need 48 subjects for the present study. However, considering a loss of 25% of the total number of the participants, we decided to go with 60 older adults that were divided into 6 groups of 10 participants each. The pre-evaluation were performed inside the medical clinic of the long-term care facility. All tests and analyses were executed by experienced team of evaluators, with the training protocol being applied by physical education professionals. Here you can see detailed pre-evaluation procedures. In the first part, we had to conduct an anamnesis to actually understand with which one we were working, followed by a MoCA questionnaire, anthropometry, bioimpedance, ultrasonography, blood samples collected, frailty index analysis, and physical functional tests. Related to anthropometric description, we analyzed the height, the body mass index, the girth measurements, the body fat, the lean body mass, the bone mass, and the muscle thickness. Related to that, I will be more specific with bioimpedance to analyze the body fat, lean body mass, and body mass, and ultrasonography to analyze the muscle thickness. So I'm to analyze the complex anthropometric parameters such as body fat, lean body mass in upper and lower limbs, as well as bone mass. We performed an octapolar bioelectrical impedance. However, it's not the best approach to analyze older adults because the bioelectrical impedance might present some fake results. So we used a formula to actually put that result in a more viable way with a higher power. So we used the formula proposed by Scanfoglieri in 2016 to analyze the body fat and the lean body mass. For the ultrasonography, we performed that with an ultrasound mod B using a linear transducer with a matrix of 10 millihertz to obtain images of the rectus femoris and bicipitis brachia's thickness. We also had to conduct the minimal change detectable several times, so it was a really good method because we avoid the problem associated with edema. And as we can see in the GERT measurements, it's not the same result that we saw with the ultrasonography. The frailty phenotype, 5 factors that I already mentioned. So weight loss, exhaustion, low energy expenditure, slow gait speed, and weak grip strength were considered the phenotype used to characterize frailty. And again, we have the 3 different classifications: robust, pre-frail, and frail. The physical evaluation was conducted through a short physical performance battery test, a tug test, a 30-second chair stand test, and a hand grip strength. Here I have the protocol used for the strength training. It was used for the eccentric training and the concentric training. That protocol was applied twice a week with an interval of 48 hours between one session to another. So we had sets going from 2 to 3 sets and the repetitions going from 10 to 15 repetitions. The intensity was from 70 to 75. However, in a few groups, in the very first week, we had to reduce to 65% because we had some struggle to actually maintain the intensity in that early stage. The analysis of biological material took into account 3 different aspects: the HbA1c, CTX, and SOT, so this superoxide dismutase. We also analyzed several other physiological factors, but we are going to use that for the manuscript because we would have too much information in the thesis. So I'm counting with all you guys to perform and construct that manuscript later on. Here you can see full proposed study design. So we start with recruitment, pre-evaluation, randomization into 6 different groups. So yeah, the groups are concentric training, eccentric training, concentric training plus creatine supplementation, eccentric training plus creatine, just creatine, and control group. We had a 2 weeks training acclimation where we tried to tell the older adults how to perform the exercises, and we actually tried to ensure the intensity that we were going to use during the protocol. We had 6 days of creatine or placebo saturation using 20 grams per day, and then it was followed by 16 weeks of training protocol. During the protocol, we had 2 different situations. One where the sample were ingesting 5 grams a day of creatine, and another one where the sample was ingesting 5 grams a day of placebo. And then after 16 weeks, we went to the final evaluation, which followed the same protocol proposed in the pre-evaluation. To characterize the sample, descriptive methods such as mean, standard deviation, and percentage frequency were employed. For the normality test, we used Kolmogorov-Smirnov. When the distribution of the data was parametric, we used a 2-way ANOVA, LSD or Turkey post hoc, and parity tests. For non-parametric distribution, we used Wilcoxon sign rank test, Kruskal-Wallis, and Bonferroni post hoc tests. The significance level we used in the present study was P less than 0.05. So here in the very first part of our discussion, I presenting the subject's characterization. Here you can see the age of the participants, the body mass, the height, the body mass index, the dominant arm perimeter, and dominant leg perimeter. As you can see, they are both classified as older adults. And then we went to the subdivision into different groups. So here we can see the comparison of body mass index, dominant arm perimeter, and dominant leg perimeter between time and within groups. Here on BMI, we cannot see any significant difference observed between any of the conditions. One of the main reasons is that sometimes when you enhance your muscle mass, you will enhance your weight. And we saw that where the intervention groups with eccentric training, concentric training, mainly the ones using creatine, had substantial increases in lean muscle mass and also reduced the body fat. However, we didn't see differences on BMI. When we look at dominant arm perimeter, we can see a significant difference within conditions compared to control group in the eccentric training plus creatine group and concentric training plus creatine compared to control group. So we had an enhancement in the dominant arm perimeter. In the legs, we didn't observe any significant difference. One of the main reasons that might explain that difference that we observed is that the lower limbs are easily used for daily activities. So it didn't suffer the same effect as the upper limbs, more specifically the arm, where we can see a significant difference between conditions. So the literature says that aging is easily associated with the accumulation of liquids inside the sarcomere. So we also expected that due to the aging process. Besides that, the resistance training also presented the same effect when we think about the perimeter of the dominant arm. So those factors are in line with the literature when we consider resistance training and creatine supplementation. When we analyze the bioimpedance analysis between conditions and groups, we can see that in the body fat, we only observed a significant difference between conditions in the concentric training group, where the reductions were really significant. Probably one of the main reasons for that difference and the significant result is related to the fact that the CT group had the higher percentage of body fat compared to all other groups. So the reduction was higher and the standard deviation was lower. So that's why we observed that difference only related to the concentric training without creatine supplementation. However, it's also important to visualize that all training protocols with or without creatine presented a slight reduction in the percentage of body fat. When we look to the lean muscle mass, we can see only a significant difference between condition on eccentric training plus creatine supplementation and concentric training plus creatine supplementation, which was also expected to verify a more pronunciated difference because of the association of creatine and concentric training. Once again, it's important to verify that both groups, the eccentric training and the concentric training, also demonstrated a small increase. But sometimes when we only aim for statistical significance, we might just ignore some clinical significance like the enhance of muscle mass and physical capacity in older adults. Finally, as expected, no difference were observed in the body mass amounts between any of the conditions. So it was also supported by the literature, where we see that the synergy between creatine supplementation and resistance training, it's a really suitable strategy to enhance the muscle hypertrophy and also reduce the body fat. The reasons for that are usually associated with a higher capacity to perform work. So you have more strength, you have more disponibility, you are more able to do anything that happen in your daily routine. So it mixed with resistance training could result in something like we are seeing here, where creatine supplementation was really useful to boost the capacity of development muscle mass. So here we have the ultrasound analysis between conditions and groups. And once again, we can see a significant difference between conditions and within groups on the group with resistance training associated with creatine supplementation. We didn't see significant differences with training alone or creatine alone. So once again, the results associated with resistance training and creatine supplementation demonstrated a very interesting result regarding the muscle thickness. Finally, when we tried to verify the rectus femoris thickness, we just saw a significant difference in the eccentric training plus creatine supplementation. And that difference was observed between conditions. So the pre and post condition changed. The reason that we might verify a higher retofemoral thickness, it's probably associated to the capacity of recruit different structural forms and associated muscles for actually execute the muscle contraction. So it ended up resulting in more muscles being activated, and therefore those muscles had been recovered, which could lead directly to a higher hypertrophy level. It was also observed by Katsura et al. On 2019, where the eccentric training was more effective compared to concentric resistance training to development retofemoral thickness when compared to concentric training. Here we have the physical function test between conditions and groups. Here in the SPPB balance score, we once again just verify a significant difference between condition and within groups for the group using eccentric training plus creatine supplementation and concentric training plus creatine supplementation, which is a little bit different from a previous result that we obtained here in our lab and a study that I published in 2020, where we saw that just the resistance training without the creatine supplementation was able to actually enhance the balance score. But probably the main reason for that change is that the sample in this study was composed only by frail older adults, while another study was composed by robust and pre-frail older adults. So that change might be related to the frailty characteristic of the sample. Regarding the gait test, the same result was observed once again, with significant difference between conditions and within groups for the eccentric training plus creatine supplementation and concentric training plus creatine supplementation compared to control group. For the chart stand test, we saw a significant difference within groups for eccentric training, concentric training, eccentric training plus creatine supplementation, and concentric training plus creatine supplementation. So we can conclude that the effect of training alone, it's also effective to development some capacity to perform daily activities like getting up from a chair. We saw a significant difference between conditions in the concentric training group, the eccentric training plus creatine supplementation, and concentric training plus creatine supplementation. Regarding the TUG test, we saw, again, a significant difference within groups compared to control group for eccentric training, for concentric training, for eccentric training plus creatine supplementation, and creatine supplementation plus concentric training. The difference between conditions was only observed on concentric training, eccentric training plus creatine supplementation, and creatine supplementation plus concentric training. Finally, to CT stand test, we saw significant difference between conditions and within groups in all intervention groups, except for the group that was taking only creatine. So the CT stand enhanced by all the conditions of resistance training, and especially for the resistance training associated with creatine supplementations. So considering the metabolic pathways that we saw earlier and the capacity to enhance the phosphocreatine amount in our body, it was expected that result would be higher in the eccentric training, concentric training associated with creatine supplementation, which was not completely clear for us yet regarding the test, was associated with the capacity to enhance, actually reduce the time on TUG test with concentric training. One of the main explanations for that might be related to the characteristic of that contraction. And during the training, they used to squat with weight during the movement. So probably it was easier for them to get up from the chair and actually walk through the parcours. Yet, regarding the physical function, we have the results about the hand grip strength on dominant hand and non-dominant hand, where once again, the eccentric training associated with creatine supplementation and the concentric training associated with creatine supplementation presented a significant difference between condition and within groups compared to control group. But here in the dominant hand, we saw that the concentric group once again had a significant enhancement compared to the precondition. So the characteristic of the concentric training might be more associated to exercises associated with hand grip. During our protocol, none of the exercises were specifically for the hand grip strength. So maybe that's why we couldn't verify a more substantial result regarding the hand grip strength. However, overall, the results followed the proposed by the literature. Regarding the physiological behavior between conditions and groups, we can observe that all conditions, the creatine alone, eccentric training, concentric training, eccentric training plus creatine supplementation, concentric training plus creatine supplementation presented significant difference between conditions and within. It's completely explained by the literature, where the resistance training alone have the capacity to promote those reductions on HbA1c. And the creatine supplementation also have the potential to reduce those levels. And the synergy that we used between the training and creatine supplementation even further the results associated with the HbA1c. So here, regarding to CTX, which is an indicator of bone mass generation, we can see a significant difference between condition, so pre and post analysis for creatine, eccentric training, concentric training, eccentric training plus concentric training, creatine supplementation, concentric training plus creatine supplementation. And here we have an explanation that the changes on CTX are directly related to the type of daily activities that the sample performs, where aerobic exercises usually are associated with enhancements in the CTX levels, and resistance training is associated with a reduction. So here we didn't analyze any substantial change in the bone mass quantity. And the CTX, we observed a significant difference between pre and post. And on eccentric training, we saw a significant difference within groups compared to control group when only the eccentric training was employed. Finally, regarding to superoxide dismutase, so analyzing the oxidative capacity of our body, we once again saw a significant difference between conditions for creatine alone, eccentric training, concentric training, eccentric training plus creatine supplementation, and concentric training plus creatine supplementation compared to control group. So both the training method and the creatine supplementation were able to enhance the amount of superoxide dismutase on our body, which it's a good signal of response to the oxidative stress, which can be a very good strategy when we think about the aging process. It was also in accordance with the previous literature, where we can see those effects when the resistance training is employed and when the creatine supplementation is employed. Regarding the frailty status, it was possible to verify that all the select subjects were characterized by at least 4 indicators, indicating that the sample was composed of frail older adults. After the resistance training protocol of 16 weeks and the association with creatine supplementation, it was possible to verify that subjects involved in the resistance training alone and resistance training plus creatine supplementation substantially enhancing their score in all scores of weakness, endurance, slowness, characterizing a change between frail to pre-frail status in all the intervention groups, except the creatine alone. So the final considerations. So we came back from our first hypothesis. So our new hypothesis was declined. The present study revealed compelling results showing that both eccentric and concentric training lead to significant changes in anthropometric and physiological parameters when employing training protocols at intensity ranging from 65 to 75% of one maximal repetition over 16 weeks period in frail older adults. However, what's even more remarkable is the additional benefits observed when combining the creatine supplementation with physical training. The synergies approach further enhanced the effects related to anthropometric and physiological parameters among frail older adults residents of a long-term care facility. Concerning the difference between eccentric and concentric training with and without creatine supplementation, we can suggest that the synergy between resistance training and creatine promotes substantial effects, substantial benefits compared to resistance training alone, which was observed through the amount of lean muscle mass, arm muscle thickness, hand grip strength, SPPB balance score, SPPB gait test, and it also further enhanced the physiological parameters with a trend of increasing HbA1c and superoxide dismutase behavior. So we partially accept the H1 and H2. Our third hypothesis was also partially confirmed, as the supplementation of creatine alone did not lead to significant improvements in anthropometric and physiological parameters. However, it did show a positive effect on superoxide dismutase activity and significant reductions on HbA1c, indicating that creatine supplementation effectively enhanced the antioxidative capacity of frail older adults. Our fourth hypothesis was confirmed with both eccentric and concentric training groups improving their frailty status and enhancements further boosted by additional of creatine supplementation. In conclusion, our study provided valuable insights into potentials of resistance training and creatine supplementations as effective strategy to enhance the functional capacity of frail older adults. However, more studies in the field must be employed to understand the effect of longer exposures to training methods, as well as higher doses of creatine aiming to attenuate the deleterious effect of aging. And here we must open a parenthesis about the cognitive effect of creatine on older populations. So maybe in a postdoc, we can continue to analyze the effects of creatine. Here, I have some of the references used in the presentation. I would like to thank for the attention of everyone here. And right now, I am at the disposal of the examination board for any question or comments related to the thesis and the presentation that I made here today.
So thank you for your presentation, Luis. And now I invite Dr. Phillips to start his questions, please.
You are muted, Professor.
Stu, you need to turn on your phone. On the bottom, beside the camera.
It should be working, but it's not working. I cannot hear you, but you are not muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh,
perfect.
yeah. Nice.
Perfect. Bom dia.
Bom dia.
Como vai?
Bem, e você, professor?
Yeah.
You are improving.
Luis, congratulations. I enjoyed reading your thesis. You and I have had a couple of discussions about your data. These studies aren't easy, and I know the amount of work that went into it. I know the things that you've had to deal with along the journey as well. So it's been a long road. Congratulations for getting to this point. Absolutely outstanding piece of work. What often happens with these types of theses is that they're so good from a science perspective, I run out of things to ask. So I'm going to ask you some questions that I'm going to challenge you a little bit, but hopefully you take them in the spirit of the challenge and not as a criticism. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So first, given the population that you have, why would you choose to separate exercises into concentric and eccentric, or shortening and lengthening?
Well, it all started on 2017 when Professor Tácito presented a manuscript published by Professor Schoenfeld. And he was trying to observe what was happening when we compared the concentric and the eccentric training protocol. And they observed that the biggest part of the perimeter observed during the concentric contractions were associated with edema. And it was not actually the cross-sectional area increasing. And it was not observed in eccentric training. On eccentric training, the enhancement observed in the perimeter was associated directly to the amount of muscle mass. So we saw that in young adults. So we start to elaborate about the possibility of that to older populations, because older populations are easily hard to work with because they have a very small pain tolerance, and sometimes exercise can be really challenging, especially when you consider like the American College position statement, where we have to use intensities going from 60 to 85% of one maximal repetition. So probably when we use eccentric training, considering that we have a higher capacity to tolerate loads, we could verify similar results without the suffer of the concentric part which is usually associated with a lot of pain after the training protocol. So
you don't think that the eccentric is associated with more pain? Because I would think because of exercise-induced damage that it would actually be more painful.
It really depends. When we work with equalized workloads, although we know that we have more strength in eccentric contractions, when we try to conduct a specific training protocol, we must try to equalize the total workload. So the total workload of my work was equalized between concentric and eccentric. So probably the eccentric was easier to tolerate when compared to concentric, since we have a higher capacity to tolerate that load. Yeah, in normal conditions where we are trying to employ a protocol and we don't have to mind specifically to the total work volume, we can go higher and heavier. But specifically in that study, considering that we had to equalize the total work, I believe the eccentric training was not as painful as the concentric, and it was observed by complaints of our older adults during the concentric, and the eccentric training was more easier to tolerate.
Okay. So you mentioned the meta-analysis that you based it on. Did you have any data on older individuals and how eccentric versus concentric compares?
Yeah, and some of them present the lack of difference between eccentric and concentric training, where another ones provide the idea that eccentric training is more viable to develop muscle strength and muscle amount, the hypertrophy overall. But the biggest point there is they try to analyze only the effect of resistance training, and we try to mix the resistance training with the creatine supplementation to verify if it could enhance even more the difference.
That's the next set of questions. So we're getting there. But I think my point would be this, Luis, is if you look at the literature in some, and you look at the manipulation of resistance training variables that we think have an effect, that we know have an effect in older people, the difference between eccentric and concentric, like it is in young people, it's not big. It's small. As far as I know, the latest meta-analysis is about 4 years old, and there was no difference in muscle mass or strength gains in old people doing eccentric or concentric. And I only ask because I'm about to lead you down to the last question, which will ask about your statistical analysis, and I'll explain why you might want to think about this a little bit differently than you've done it to this point. So I completely understand why you would use creatine. I don't think that we can deny that as a supplement, it's the king, right? It's the supplement that's most associated with beneficial outcomes in all of those circumstances. In combination with the various contractions, I'll agree, no data. So I just want for you to walk me through your statistical model the way you've got it right now, because you've got 6 groups. So that's a lot. So, and congratulations on including a control group. It's not often done. A control group taking creatine, amazing. And then you've got contraction type and you've got creatine. So what's the first analysis that you would run on that? Explain it to me and tell me how it's structured. I read your thesis, but just walk me through the statistics of how that works.
Okay, so we can go directly to the parametric and non-parametric data, or
no, we're not going to do that yet. I'll tell you why. So the first factor that's common to everybody is time, right?
Yeah.
You've got pre and you've got post. Then we've got a between group comparison of some people are exercising and some people are not. So broadly, I'll say, exercise versus no exercise. But then you've subdivided the exercise groups into eccentric and concentric. And then within that, you also have creatine. So that, as far as I figured it out, would be a 5-way analysis of variance.
Yeah. And
that's tough. You ever done that before?
No, I didn't.
No, neither have I.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's really hard.
I'll tell you what happens when you have so many groups and you look for the test of normality. The normality is assessed within each group. So knowing that, are you surprised that you failed the normality test?
Kinda.
No, you had only had a few subjects in each group.
I had high expectations about that, and when I saw that, I was, okay, so let me think how I'm gonna solve that problem. So I remember that I spoke with Sabrine, that is advice from Professor Paulo Bento, and we tried to, okay, so we can solve that problem going through kurtosis and maybe employ an ANCOVA through our data to actually get beyond that point, but it was a real struggle that we couldn't deal with. Later on, I have discussed with Professor Scott Forbes, okay, so what should we do about that? And probably he said that he, with Professor Darren, are easily working with a specific type of ANOVA that can make a general analysis. And we are going to try to run that again, because we want to publish that in a specific journal, Journal of Cachexia. And the threshold over there, it's really high. So everything must be perfect aligned to have a chance to enter there.
Sure. I like my solution is maybe somewhat practical, right? So when you take 60 people and you divide them into 6 groups, there's only 10 persons in each group. So it's very difficult to get a normal distribution within each group. So that's why you failed the normality test. Overall, I'm sure it was normally distributed data. If you took everybody and plotted them pre and plotted them post, you would get a normal distribution. Okay, sure. You see what I'm saying? So you failed the normality test, and so immediately reverting to non-parametric statistics, you make it very difficult to detect differences because you have so many degrees of freedom. So bear with me here. Let me say that I think that the differences between eccentric and concentric were so small that you could just call it exercise. And so you collapse it across those 2 groups. You pool them. And then it becomes a comparison of exercise with creatine versus exercise without creatine versus 2 control groups, which I applaud you for doing. Was there a difference between either of those 2 control groups at any time, pre to post or in any measure?
Sounds like a good plan. I didn't thought about that because Professor Tácito sometimes say something like, sometimes we fall in love with our research.
Sure.
You want to see that work.
So I'm in love. I'm in love with your research. I think it's great research. I'm making some suggestions that it might make it easier for you to tell a story, which is clearly there. But it's just, so I think, you know, when you were going into this, you had all of these questions, and congratulations for doing the perfect design to answer the questions that you wanted to address. the main issue, and I'm going to bring you to a part of your thesis, and I just want for you to tell me, and I don't know if I can find it now that I was just scanning through it just now, but it doesn't really matter. But in the thesis, you describe your power calculation.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that's missing from that description is on what variable you based your power calculation. So you give me the effect size, you give me everything in there, and you tell me this number of total subjects, so you divide it out by group, but I don't know what the variable is that you put into the effect size calculation, or to the power size calculation.
I see. I'm trying to find that here. Oh, it's on page 41.
Right.
No. Yeah, I just put the number of the measures, but I didn't.
But you needed a measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what I mean, that's critical, right? You mentioned JCSM, and you're right. They've got a high bar, and I think that they would like this work, but I think that these are some of the things that you really need to tighten up before you get there. So you need to let all of the readers know what was the variable that you put in to the sample size calculation with the effect sizes that you have. And hopefully it was related to your primary outcome, which would either be muscle thickness or muscle cross-sectional area or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Just for me to understand, I don't know if you are with the thesis opened there.
Mm-hmm.
So on the point 4.24 on the subjects, after I said the number of the measurements, I should mention which of the measures are that.
Yeah, so what is it based on? What is the variable that that calculation is based on?
Got it. Yeah. That's a mistake. I just put the number. So yeah, I have to explain what I did. I have that really clear in my mind, but someone else reading don't have.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'm marking it here just to correct.
Yeah, no problem. I have your document and I've made some notes on it, and I'll send it back to you, and you can work with your supervisor to fix that. Okay. All right. So my last question, Luis, great job, right? Hopefully you're getting the message. The science is great. Everything is outstanding. I really like it. I think you've just made it very difficult on yourself to find these differences. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because of you split things up, which the design is perfect, but it's a very complicated design because you've got factors within factors, and then between groups and within group comparisons, because everybody's got pre-post. But then you've layered in, you factorialized in creatine supplementation, you factorialized in the type of contraction, and you have two control groups. Congratulations for doing it. It's outstanding. The question is, do you need two control groups? Because you could speak about them separately and say, but actually the creatine control group who did nothing, we didn't see any differences pre to post between it and the control group. So the control group becomes the collapsed sum of those two. And then in doing that, you gain a lot more statistical power. And I'd hasten to add, your design becomes a lot simpler.
Yeah, that makes completely sense. I
don't know if maybe it doesn't, but I mean, to me, that's, I know just enough statistics to be dangerous. I'm probably not enough to know that this may not be the right thing to do, but I know you guys will figure it out. So.
I'm gonna bother you about that.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, bother away. One comment, and I think you maybe, I think you undersold the importance of this outcome in your discussion. And the reason I say this is that the changes that you had in HbA1c were very impressive. You understand why?
Because we saw a significant difference just with creatine supplementation. It was something really different. We saw that like the probable mechanism behind that, but when I saw the result, and it's just a part of results, like I sent the email to you a few days ago, we have a lot of data, a lot of data that I didn't get yet, because when we made the project, I was talking with Professor Tácito, and we were like, okay, let's try to grab a few things that we can use to publish later on, because here in Brazil we have a specific demand that we must publish a lot. They don't care about quality, they care about numbers. So we do that to have more data to discuss and actually demonstrate the effect of the things that we are doing.
All good. I just, my point basically, Luis, is to emphasize to you that in this population, when you see the magnitude of difference in HbA1c as a marker of long-term glycemic control, that's a very, very impactful finding. Yeah, I know it's just one line in your, but it's a big deal. So I'm just emphasizing it for you because that is something that you'll want to talk about a little bit more and emphasize and amplify in your data. I understand the issues with the Brazilian funding landscape, and no problem. It's all good. But I just wanted to point out to you, and I think sometimes students, they focus so much and they don't maybe take time to step back and think, what are the health consequences of that? Because that's an extraordinarily robust drop. And it's pretty, like, it's creatine alone. It may even be close to, maybe not statistically so, bigger in the exercise groups. That's a big deal. Okay.
Yeah, and that's completely right. Once again, I probably underestimate the result because I was looking to another side. And when we talk with other people, more specific people, they show us things that we don't see all of the time. So I'm gonna take a closer look on that because, like you said, it's a huge health outcome. So we must verify that more deeply and try to discuss.
But along with everything, Luis, yeah, like this is improvements in function. This is improvements in mobility. This is improvements in a population that is not often studied, with a supplementation that's in there. It's a ton of work. And so, you know, all I'm doing is I'm trying to re-emphasize to you the importance of what you've got done, and to maybe help you a little bit with some of the things that you know, it's about the message, and the message is a fantastic one. So just don't, you know, go through this and just think the design and everything that was wrong with the design, because there's so much that's right about the design. I just think you have to simplify some of the things that you've done in there maybe a little bit. But I'll finish by just saying a huge congratulations. Parabéns, yeah, I've got the right word?
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much, Professor.
Okay, yeah, my pleasure. Professor Cito, I pass, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Stu, thank you very much for your considerations, which will be mandatory, of course. And I would like to invite you to work with us on publish the paper, okay? This work was very hard. The population was hard. People was in healthcare. It's complicated, very complicated. But let's work. Let's work. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Candow to start his questions, please.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Luis. I echo Dr. Phillips' sentiments. It was a when I read the thesis, I was just thinking, God, that must have taken a lot of work. And of course, when COVID hit, and thinking about how important that was to implement exercise in long-term care is outstanding. And so congratulations to you. It's an enormous task to do such a great body of work. And I guess I'll start very similar to Dr. Phillips. The first thing I thought of is when I saw all those groups, I was like, wow. I remember doing a study back in the day, and Dr. Phillips was bang on. It's called contrast analysis, where I was thinking, geez, there wasn't much change in either group. And if you look at all your bar graphs, the change is almost identical between resistance training and creatine. And if you collapse those groups, maybe you're doing a 3x2 ANOVA. So essentially your power goes up. And I think that's something you'll want to do even for the thesis or publication, because my guess is it may change your subjective conclusions. So I'll get to the eccentric a little bit later, because I wasn't sure how you actually could do this. I've tried this on an isokinetic dynamometer, and I don't know how you do eccentric by yourself. I don't know, but it's going to be very interesting how you explain it. But I think what got lost in your thesis was the critical importance of resistance training. I do creatine research, but I didn't see any greater effect of creatine more than resistance training. I think the way it was spun is that the combination was better than control. And if creatine by itself and exercise by itself wasn't, even with some time changes, when I read your final conclusion, it said, greater adaptations when the two were combined. And I don't know if that's actually true based on your data, and that may be just based on the stats. I think if anybody was to take creatine by itself, it's not going to hardly do any beneficial effects. I mean, obviously you showed some A1C and NTL peptides, but that could be probably by chance when you do a statistical analysis with the low sample. And I think, as Dr. Phillips mentioned, when you maybe do contrast analysis, they may get washed out. And I think that's something to do just for your own conclusions. But when I read it, I was like, oh, we're kind of missing the really importance of resistance training. I felt like it was sort of being really undersold. And I think for this population, 99.9% of any benefit is going to come from exercise, and a very minimal amount, if any, would be from creatine. So I think that's something that will probably wash out in the laundry if you do that a different analysis. But the body of work is exceptional. And so I just wanted to touch on maybe the stats and how you could do that over time, because I just want to be clear that it was only creatine and resistance training that was better than control, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so in theory, you can't say creatine and resistance training was better than resistance training alone, right?
Yes.
Okay, and I think that's driven by the point that creatine by itself had a minimal effect on any of the physical parameters. So from a knowledge translation, I think exercise got to be there, and creatine may give a small effect, and that's something to consider. When you did talk about creatine and all the purported mechanisms, have any of that really been shown in older adults, or has it primarily been established in young individuals?
Can you repeat once again, Professor?
Yeah, I know you did a really good job talking about all the potential mechanisms like satellite cells and transcription factors and mTOR. And has any of that ever been shown in older adults to be present, or is it primarily based on young muscle?
Well, I saw a research, the one that I mentioned from back from 2017, that he analyzed that and he proposed it on older adults. I believe it would be similar to the young adults regarding the metabolism, because although it's aged, it have the same possibilities to actually develop the better signal of satellite cells and enhance the AKT mTOR. But a real test of the mechanism, I didn't see, not yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point, because most things that are purported with creatine, many studies have shown they're naturally reduced with aging. Satellite cell content. You mentioned mTOR, and of course, Dr. Phillips would know way more about this, but creatine has never been shown to increase protein synthesis, has it?
I believe I saw a study, if I'm not mistaken, it's from Professor Gualano, where he analyzed the effect of creatine supplementation on P70. I forgot the name of the pathway.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the end, after the mTOR activation. So I believe I saw it was in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, where he tried to analyze the effect of creatine specifically through the muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's only been a few studies that have tried this. One is at Dr. Phillips University. Johnny Parisi did a surrogate of whole body breakdown, and Peter Hespel's group. But actually, it's never been shown to increase the rates of protein synthesis. And even if it does turn on a downstream of mTOR, that's just sort of a snapshot. And so I guess at the end of the day, if you were to told an older adult that creatine will probably increase measures of muscle mass, explain to me really quickly, how do you think it would increase muscle mass?
Increase the muscle mass, it's something complicated, because just the creatine wouldn't have the capacity to do that, because even if you enhance the capacity of protein synthesis, you will have to have the protein and the amino acids to perform that process. So yeah, we are just seeing like, oh, it might affect here, but we didn't actually check that. So a direct pathway where the creatine could do that, it's a little bit hard to elaborate.
Okay, yeah. One of the theories was, they talk about water swelling or cell swelling, and it sort of stimulates a lot of things. And I don't think we really know how it works, or if it does increase dry muscle mass, because one of the things with lean mass is, and I think the estimate is maybe 50% of lean mass might be muscle, but very rare in creatine research do we ever measure even muscle biopsies for fiber area. So that's always an indication as well. One thing I noticed, did you actually have an ability with the nutritionist to see how much protein they were eating?
Yes.
Okay.
They were following the RDA recommendations. It's something around 0.8 grams multiplied by the body weight of protein every day. So since they were in a long-term care facility, they had like a controlled meal every day. So we can think that the recommendation was being attended, but the real question is that recommendation, it's enough for older adults, especially frail older adults. So it's another good discussion that we thought a few months ago with Professor Tácito, that the recommendations are enough.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Dr. Phillips is the world leader on this, and he's clearly showed, I think the RDA is probably outdated, especially for healthy adults, let alone individuals considered frailty. So maybe even in your thesis, you could talk about maybe 0.8 grams was likely not enough. And that could be something to consider, maybe a blunted the hypertrophic response to all conditions. That's something that would be interesting to see. What if they were taking more protein? Maybe they would have got a greater response, but that's something to consider, because I think 0.8 grams at their body weight is quite low. Probably they want to have 1.2 to 1.6 or even more if they're considered frail. And that's something, because at the end of the day, you need protein. You don't need creatine. You need protein to enhance the effects, and that's something to consider as well. Again, it's a lot of data, is exceptional. I was really interested in the NTL peptides and the markers of inflammation, because I think that low-grade inflammation is happening But again, when you do the contrast analysis, maybe you'll get a better, clear picture of that with the multiple groups. I just have a couple more. Yeah, so maybe if you could go back and tell me how they did this eccentric. I'm very curious.
It was a really hard work, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Every day I had to go to the long-term care facility, and I had to have at least 2 people with me to assist me with the resistance training, because we didn't have isokinetic equipment, so we used free weights. So how it worked, when he was going to squat during the eccentric, we put the weight in the back and he squat. For the moment he was going up, we had to remove the weight so he could go up without the weight. And that's why it's mainly eccentric and mainly concentric, because they have some mixed contractions, but the main effect, the load, was used during only the eccentric or the concentric. It was really hard. It was exhausting because I couldn't train during that. It took around 20 weeks from the beginning to finish everything. And I couldn't go to the gym because every time I arrive at home after the intervention, I just wanted to sleep because it was really complicated. And once again, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to have people to help me. So a few students from Midwestern State University went every day with me there just to conduct everything. So it was really complicated, but I'm kind of happy with the result, because sometimes when we use the isokinetic, it doesn't represent the reality. How many gyms do we have with those type of equipments? Very few, but people trying to help, or maybe a personal trainer or something like that that could be present during the training protocol, can make that adjustment on the training protocol. Like if we had a huge difference, that could be a good deal. Unfortunately, like we saw, it was not a really good difference. So at least we know now that it doesn't work. I remember I was talking with Professor Forbes, and we were discussing about the bone mass and the CTX that I used to analyze that, and I was completely frustrated because instead of going up, it went down. And then I went to Professor Forbes and asked, "Oh my God, what's going on? I'm just lost 16 weeks of my life on that, and it's not working." And his answer was, "Oh, take it easy. Darren lost 2 years with you." Okay, so, well, less worse than 2 years, but it's kind of frustrating because we want to see that effect, but it doesn't happen all of the time.
Yeah, that is like, thank you for that. That is an enormous amount of work. Like, I think you need to highlight that more, that they were individually supervised and assisted. And oh my God, that is just an enormous amount of effort, which I think is not appreciated in the thesis, that you need to celebrate a bit more, that the hands-on personal attention that I think is happening. So again, kudos to you. That is quite a bit of effort and thoughts into that. And finally, you talk about we'll just focus on the eccentric. And you talked about how it may decrease or increase muscle damage potentially over time, and that may be one of the main reasons. But one of the main purported things about creatine is it decreases inflammation and damage. So do you think they would cancel each other out? Like, what was your thought process on that?
I believe it depends on the amount of creatine and inflammation that we have in the body. But overall, it's probably related to dose response. Like we saw some problems with vitamin C and the lack and the reduction of inflammation due to the antioxidant antioxidative capacity. But I believe that with 5 to 8 grams a day, we wouldn't have a deleterious effect over the hypertrophic signaling pathway. At least as far as I am aware. I might be mistaken, and please feel free to correct me, but I don't think it would negatively impact on that characteristic.
Okay. And my last question was there any adverse effects from the training or supplementation? You know, did anybody get hurt, or did they like it, or, you know, from a practical perspective?
From a practical perspective, everyone in the long-term care facility was pretty sure that they were intaking creatine. So they all felt more vivid and relieved, like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's working. So overall, it's really, I'm not sure if that's the correct word in English, but they are needy because they don't have the right attention. So every time we went there, they become happy because they have someone else to talk, and they know that we are going to spend at least 1 hour where we could be working out and talking about everything else. So it was quite good for me, like for a personal growth, because I heard a lot of stories. I saw changes in people that could barely getting up from a chair, and after the intervention they were like walking and talking happily about the things that they could do in the daily life. So it was awesome, to be honest.
At the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing to take away from this, that you improved some capacity in someone's life. So it's amazing. So that's all my questions for now. Thank you so much, and congrats. Great job.
Thank you very much, Professor.
So Darren, thank you very much for your comments. I really appreciate. And I don't know if Luis told you, but this intervention was too long, and some subjects died during the intervention.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Well, it was terrific.
Yes. Yeah.
But so I'd like to invite you to work with us to publish this paper. Okay, it will be a very good paper.
Yes,
okay?
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Bento to start your comments, please.
Hi, thank you, Professor Tácito. I'd like to start thanking for the invitation, Luis, for participating in this qualified examiner board. And I'd like to thank you to Professor Tácito. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate you, Luis, for your brilliant presentation. Some doubts I had when I read your document were solved with your brilliant presentation. It was a very good work. I know we know the difficulty we have to prescribe exercise with older adults living in the community, and even more when this population you applied your work. To break ice, I'd like to asking two questions for you. Two general questions. One, which result of your study do you consider the most important, most caught your attention?
Right now, Professor, I changed my mind due to Stuart. So I can say that the H1ACB was the main finding. But before that, I thought that it was really interesting to visualize the differences in the physical activity performance because besides the science world and everything that it's around us, know that we can provide a better quality of life for someone else, it's something really huge. And a very few professions have the ability to make that. So I'd say the physical results, the SPPB test, the TUG test, was something that to me implies in a direct effect on their daily routine. So probably there it's my major point that I liked in the thesis.
I totally agree with you. When I was reading your document, just in the end of the document, we could realize the results concerned to frailty status. And it was very nice result because it's very difficult to change the state from a frail to pre-frail status. We had worked and researched before with this population, but we just make an intervention with frail, pre-frail, in order to reverse their status to robust. But with frail, this reversal from frail status to pre-frail was a brilliant result of your study. The second question, general question, what was the great challenge you faced in proposing a resistant training in this group, long-term care room residents?
Well, the first challenge was actually convince them that they have to go and work out with me. Because although that they like to be with someone else, when that someone else is making them work out, it's not a good deal, not always, to be honest. So I had to negotiate with another person that was living inside the long-term care facility. It was an older adult that was residing there. So he was like, oh, if you bring me some stuff, I can convince them to work out with you. So we tried to talk, and he wanted chocolate and things like that. So I gave that to him, and then people started to actually go into workout. So convincing people was really hard, but the hardest part was actually conducting the workout, because like I was explaining to Professor Darren, it was exhausting, because it's really hard to put the weight and remove the weight like for 1 hour in a row with 4 to 5 older adults every time. Even though we had at least 2 people with me during all the process, it's something hard. Thank God they are not that strong, so it's easier to put the weight, but it was really hard to conduct the strength training protocol.
Yes, I imagine. And you didn't show in your document the consort or the design student informing the eligible people in the beginning of the work and who didn't meet the inclusion criteria. And I was very impressed that all the 60 people who start the research, the intervention, finish the intervention, and you could analyze all the data of all these participants. It is incredible. Your power of convincement is very high.
Not really. Let me tell you a story. Like Professor Tácito already told us, we first start with 74 older adults for the acclimation process. Even during the acclimation, we start to lose some people that didn't want to go for a specific place to work out, or they thought that they couldn't do exercise because the doctor said that they should not work out. it's dangerous. So I lost some people during the acclimation, and we lost 3 people that died during the process. So from the 74, we end up with the 60 that we originally thought to construct the groups, and they were randomly distributed among the groups. But we lost a few, mainly during the acclimation process, because it's really hard for someone else that doesn't make exercise to start to do something. It's aggressive for everything in their body. So yeah, I lost a few, but we end up with the specific sample.
Okay, I think it's very important to report in your document the whole process. I think this information is mandatory to us and to readers understand the whole process, because it seems to be more realistic, because it's not possible to have 100% of your eligible population participating and finishing the study without dropped out and things like that.
I remember that in 2020, I spoke with Professor Phillips about the possibility of doing an intention to treat with the sample.
Yeah.
And we thought about that idea, but I need to learn a little bit more about intention to treat, because somehow I believe that with the collections that we made, a pre and post analysis, with the intention to treat, I would basically repeat the baseline. So it could fake a result, or sometimes even be an outlier that's gonna bring the statistic to another place that it shouldn't be. But perhaps it might be an idea to conduct an intention to treat analysis with that sample that we lost. Mainly the 3 ones that died because they stayed with us for like 10 weeks. And one of them was a guy that was always with us. He loved to work out. So I remember when I arrived in a long-term care facility and I didn't see him walking. So I went to ask about that, and they said that he felt, and he broke his femur in 3 pieces. He was okay at the time, but 2 or 3 days later, unfortunately, he passed out. And he was one of the better subjects in the study. It was really sad, but nothing that we can do about.
Okay. Yes, there is different approach to use the inpatient to treat, not to replace the results from the baseline, but it's we have to choose this approach and consider this information in this talk. I'd like to ask you why Professor Phillips said before and comment about your statistical analysis, and I took notes in your PDF file, and I'm going to send you after this presentation. And I have some comments about your approach, statistical approach, but you can see this before and think about what you can do after the defense. And there is just one comment that is simple, but do you use the word condition? And sometimes on word that can be mistaken for intervention type. When you refer to condition to talk about pre and post test.
Yes.
And when I was reading your document, sometimes I was in doubt if you are talking about the intervention type or the pre and post test. So I suggest to use time and group that it can solve this problem. Also to present your results, because sometimes we have time effect, just time effect, and sometimes the interaction time and group. It will be easier to the readers understand our work.
Perfect. It's a very good call. I thought about that and talking with other people about the thesis and the presentation. They said it's a little bit confusing. So yeah, probably change condition to time, because condition is easily associated for a specific type of intervention. So changing condition to time will be more clear that we are talking about pre and post analysis. And give a better insight about what's going on. Agreed. Thank you very much, Professor.
So I'm not a specialist in sport nutrition, so my focus on your results were more in the physical function and the functionality. I realized that you applied the SPPB battery. We like a lot this battery, this physical test battery. And I was trying to understand more about the description of the SPPB in our work. And first I would like to ask why you didn't use the total score of SPPB. But reading our description of test, I note that you replace one test of the battery, more specifically the 5 times get up from a chair to the 30 seconds. Why did you do this replacement? You apply a test that is not comprise the SPPB.
I did that because, like I said, when we first arranged the groups and everything else, we had some older adults in a really bad condition. Like they could barely walking. And besides walking, actually they could walk. They had a very hard time getting up from a chair. So when I saw a 5 times getting up, I knew that many of them wouldn't reach 5 times to getting up from the chair, at least in the precondition in the time. So we aimed to put the 30 seconds because he would feel okay if he just made like 1 or 2 repetitions instead of I'm staying with him waiting for him to make the 5 repetitions. So that's the reason that we replaced specifically the task of 5 times. I tried to collect that, and in the first 10 evaluations I noticed they were feeling really uncomfortable with the task, which didn't happen like during the tests or everything else. So discussing with other people, we thought that we could swap the 5 times to 30 seconds, and then they would feel more safe to just make like 1 or 2 repetitions, and that would be okay during that period of time.
Okay. I think that you have to report this too, because in fact you use some tests that comprise the battery, but not exactly the battery. And it's important to report this because use of these batteries to understand the level of physical performance, observing the scores they achieve in the end of the test. And obviously, considering the population you applied your intervention, we expect that all the subject achieve no more than 6 or 7 points in this battery, which is related to their physical conditions. It's expected that they didn't got a great or higher score.
I'm gonna make that correction.
Okay, just inform, because inform that what you did and the reason, because I know that if they couldn't make 5 repetitions, it's not possible to get the time they spend to do.
Okay.
Let me see what appointment I did, a note I take. I think that one difficult, great challenge in your work was that you have a lot of outcomes to discuss. I took some notes when you divide in primary and secondary outcomes, and if I'm not wrong, there is more than 10 or 12 different outcomes. So it was a challenge to you, because you have to discuss these results. When you, if you assess it, you need to discuss. And it was just a comment. As we have an opportunity to improve the document, you can hand it to our library, it's necessary to make some adjustment. And I note that the discussion you made related to the physiological measure was more deeply than you made with the physical, functional, or even the anthropometric measure. When you discuss some anthropometric measures, some other results, sometimes you get some source in the literature that was not similar to your study design. You did an intervention, and sometimes you are discussing your results, considering cross-sectional studies or observational studies or correlational studies, different from the part of the physiological measures, in which I think you did more deeply discussion. So just in order to make a more robust document, final document, I suggest that you review this part of the work and to correct or to improve this part of your document. I have one more suggestion concerned to the frailty status. I think it would be a good information to, in your first table 1, I think, when you put the characteristics of your participants, to include there, because I just know about their status, frailty status in the end of the work. And as it is in your title, your population is so in the table 1, when you characterize your participants, it's important to inform this. All of them are frail, if you want, what criteria they achieve to be classified as frail.
Just one question, Professor. So do you think it's better to put that on the table 1, where I presented the characteristics of the subjects? I think it's
Yes, yes.
because I'm going through like an overall view of the sample, so I believe it makes sense to put the frailty status because, like I said, it was just in the end and it's in my title. So maybe I can elaborate a little bit more about that.
Yes, 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 can be. But at least in the first table, just to inform your reader that yes, we selected a group of people who are frailty, and I'm showing to you their characteristics here.
Perfect.
So, Luis, I think you have good. Just to remember, I was thinking that I participate in your in your selection when you apply to the PhD, and in that time your project was almost defined as you present here. And I remember that one thing I asked you was in relation to the acceptance of the eccentric trait by the older adults. And I asked you because of the muscle pain, and I think you need to think about it when you applied your intervention. And I did one more comment that I really appreciate to see in your final document, the implementation of the physical tests and the tests who are related to the daily lived activity. So just to highlight this in this very important moment for you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I remember the exact words that you said. It was something like what it implies in a real life situation, like the things that I was originally thinking, because I thought to use isokinetic, and you said, well, it probably doesn't imply to our reality. So you brought that to my attention, and I'm really glad for that, because although the work was hard, maybe harder than if we had isokinetic, I believe that those results have like a direct practical application, like where people could test what we did without specific equipments and stuff. So it brings something to think about when we think about older adults. I believe you had a huge part on that process as well. So I'm really glad you are here to see the final presentation. You are a big part of it.
Paulo, you need to turn on your phone.
I had some problem with my connection here. Congratulations for your work again, and thank you, Professor Tácito, to invite me. And it was an honor to participate at this moment. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, Paulo, thank you very much for your comments. You'll be mandatory too. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Mascarenhas to start his questions.
Well, good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank you, Dr. Tácito, for the invitation, and Luis Boiko to be part of this board examination. I would like to say it's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Phillips and Dr. Candow, and Mr. Paulo Bento. Is always nice to talk to you and be with you in the border to discuss about the presentation. First of all, I would like to say congratulations, Luis. For me, it's a very pleasure moment because I saw your journey as a student, start an undergraduate course, master, and now in PhD. So I'm very glad to be your teacher at undergraduation course. And also, I'm very glad to see all the hard work you have in your journey and how your achievements and your growth in this period of time. So congratulations. I think this is very nice, and I'm very glad and happy to be with you in all these moments. So congratulations. Well, it's easier to be the last one after so great doctors that talked before me. So I have a little suggestions to make, and also to try to reinforce what someone already did talk about it. First of all, when you look in your document, I think you must be attention a little bit more in your abstract. So we talk a little bit more about the supplementation of creatine must be in your conclusion on your abstract, and also pay attention a little bit more what mentioned about HbA1c and metabolics. So it should be one of the things. I also suggest, like as Paulo did just before, that FRAILTY must be in your table to describe, but also I think you should mention the proportion of genders in your groups. How many women, how many men, so you should mention that. That could be a variable that we need to know and a little bit more. And also, my question for you, when you did the statistical analysis, if you take care a little bit to correct all your data by gender, how it was?
I tried, Professor, to see if we could verify parametric situation. However, even stratifying it by sex, it didn't change much. To be completely honest with you, I tried a lot. Like I used to say that there are small lies, medium lies, and statistics, because you can say anything with statistic. And I tried to remove outliers. I tried to work with that, but nothing worked. So although I tried, the difference between man and female was something huge. The biggest part of the sample, it's composed by females. We had like four to seven men in the present study. So it didn't change much about that. So I don't think it would make a real difference. But I believe that we must clarify the classifications, how many men and female were present in each group.
Great, thank you. And I think this is some important information. And how the others before me highlight, and what come to my eyes when I was reading your thesis was related to the HbA1c results. I think clinically we can say that all your patients was diabetes, and they had the diabetes already because the glycate was over 7.0%, so that's clinical diabetes. So this is very important. And you know that this is my issue of studies and everything. So I think this is the first time I saw so big results of reduction around 1.0% of HbA1c in one study that you found it when you added creatine to the exercise. Normally, and if you go through the literature, you're going to see that around 0.5 to 0.7 is the average that we found it. So you achieve a very high percent of reduction. This clinically is amazing. So you should put all your effort on that. And when you go to make a publication, you have to reinforce that, because of course, I don't know if you had another metabolic points like microalbuminuria or creatine clearance, but it's very interesting if you can bound that together, if you have this also these measurements or these metabolic points, because you can create a relationship between supplementation and creatine and exercise to reduce HB1C clinically. So I think it's very interesting, this point of your study. So you have to be very, very aware that for me, it's the first study I saw that reduced so much points in the percentage of duplicated. So congratulations for that. We know also that other markers, like you said, CTX and also SOG, they are also give to you some situation that you're showing that you're improving metabolic of bones and also increase oxidation of the cells. And I'm totally aware with Mr. Candow that when he say that water is the key point, because some studies are showing that when you increase the amount of water, the membrane signalization can be increased, and then it's also increase all the cascade that come inside the cell. So I totally agree with Mr. Candow when you achieve that. So you can use this as a main point for publication. And I think this line of studies, I'm already talking with all my students and say, look, let's come to supplement with creatine to see what's happened, because we have a lot of studies located time of insulin that we use it, the time they exercise before lunch or after lunch or something like that, but we never fought with supplementation. So congratulations for this achievement that you and your supervisor come to us. Well, after that, I just want to say, and I think it's very important for us, is that your study is showing how important is to people that is in house cares to exercise. Because as Mr. Phillips said, when you come to health, well-being, your studies show that health exercise with supplementation show in metabolical and day-of-the-day activities, and all the results or body composition also is improving. So we must, as a professional, as a teachers, we have to go to our politicians and showing that these results to create new public policies that we can at least have inside this house or inside of elders' house a possibility of having exercise as a mandatory concept, not at least only. Oh, sorry, forget the enfermeira. Nurses. Oh, thank you. Not nurses and doctors, but also physical education inside this house. So I think your dissertation comes to this high level of public policy that is very important also. So that's what I have to say, and congratulations you and supervisor for all the works. I know that was hard because I was there. I follow some of your work. Some of my students also was trainees with you, trainings in this study. So I'm very glad to see all the achievements that you have it, and congratulations for the hard work you had during this period. Thank you very much. Tácito, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mascarenhas. I really appreciate your comments. Will be mandatory too. And now, I just want to say some words about this difficult work. This project was very hard, you know, was very hard. It's very difficult to go to a home care facility and put all the older guys to doing exercise and supplement. Was very difficult. And I remember when I visited Stu at McMaster University, and I saw his huge project at the university, and I saw a lot of old guys doing exercise every single day. And that time, Stu introduced me to a special man that at that time he was with 100 years old. Remember, Stu, Mr. John, is he still alive?
John unfortunately passed away about 6 weeks ago. He was 105. So it's hard to argue that he didn't have a good life. He still came into our facility right up until about 6 months before he died. He didn't do much exercise. He did a lot of talking, but fantastic to see. I know, Luis, you mentioned when you work with these people, it's a very special population. But yeah, Tácito, he was always my model of how to age well, for sure.
Yeah, it was fantastic. You need to put a statue of Mr. John in the gymnasium. Yeah, so it was a honor, of course. Wow, it was fantastic. And now we need to go to another room to talk each other and say,
do you want me to leave and then I come back?
Yeah. Rodrigo, the secretary, will open another room, and we go to another room to talk about, to see if you'll be approved or not. I don't know. It depends on the examining board. And we go and back. Okay, you just go drink some cup of coffee, relax. Yeah,
Boiko,
I know that's very difficult
here
to defend your thesis in another language. And for us, Brazilian, we speak English, but it's very difficult, you know. And take your time, go drink your coffee, and let we decide about your future.
Sounds good. Rodrigo said something.
Boiko, stay at the room. You can shut off your camera, go take a little breath. And the professors, I will now create another support room. You just accept the invitation that will show up at your screen, and you go to the another room. Okay, just a second, please.
Let's see the invitation. Okay, just click. Is in Portuguese, entrar na sala. Just click. Okay. Let's wait our Canadian friends. Hello, Darren. Everybody is listening? Okay. Okay. Now I need to read the final document here. Okay. It's right. I need to do this. And approval minute. The examining board is designed by the faculty of the graduate program of the Federal University of Paraná in physical education, were invited to argue the dissertation of philosophy doctor by Luiz Henrique Boiko Ferreira, entitled Effects of 16 Weeks of Eccentric versus Concentric Strength Training, Creatine Supplementation in Older Adults. An essay about physical functionality and frailty, under the supervision of Dr. Tácito, Pessoa de Souza, Júnior, with and after assessment of the candidates and the work, the examining board. I'm getting old. It's not whiskey, but only water. Decide for approval in the present right. So now I'd like to get some more, please. I'm really getting old. So,
it just shows you care. It just shows you care, Tácito. It just shows you care.
Yeah. I'm going to make some quick considerations about Louis' trajectory in my lab at the postgraduate program. This guy is like a son, you know. Louis has always been a brilliant student, and I have taken him to several ACSM annual meetings, and he always performed impeccably, and still can confirm this. I remember the first time I put him to the test at the ACSM by having him present his post to the legendary Dr. Robert Robertson Omni Scale, and he did very well. It was fantastic. Louis went through difficult times last year with serious health problems, but managed to turn things around and finish his doctorate. Now, Dr. Ferreira is already employed at the university in Santa Catarina, and by the way, working a lot. So, without going any further, I wish Dr. Ferreira good luck and an excellent career. Feel hugged, and let's work hard to this final document. And I would like to invite all the examining board to participate in the final document and the publication. And and let's publish this work. And of course, we sent a pilot to ACSM 2024, next year. And as I said to my Canadian friends, let's go there, drink some, like people from Boston say, drink some beers, and let's work. Thank you, man.
Thank you very much, Professor. I'm not sure if all of you are still seeing the presentation, but I want to say some words here in my acknowledgements. The first image is the picture of a tomography that I made in the end of the last year. And as you can see, that big ball here, it used to be my kidney, and I had to remove that. I almost died, probably more than once, and that changed the perspective of life. You start to consider some other stuff, and it's really important to move on. Professor Tácito, I remember when I passed in the masters, you said that you will have my soul for a few years, and yeah, you still have my soul. But I want to tell you that I have your soul as well, at least part of it. There's not a single day that I went to class that I don't think about you, about the stories that you told us, about the things that you teach me. And it's something that it's really hard to put on words, but I don't have enough words to say how grateful I am to you, because you are not just a supervisor, you are a friend. And that kind of stuff, it's really hard to find sometimes. So thank you very much for everything you did to me. You will always means a lot to me. Like you said, I'm working a lot, like 14 to 16 hours a day. But keep in mind that I'm at least with part of you all of those days, because every time I go to class, I remember things that you said that I should do, things that I should avoid. So you're not just a supervisor, you are way more than that. So thank you very much. I would like to extend my gratitude to all the professors, Professor Darren, Professor Stuart. You were always an inspiration to me. Like, I remember in 2020 when Professor Stuart Phillips went to see my presentation, and when he arrived in the conference room, everyone turned to the door to see Dr. Phillips arrive, and it was really awesome to know that he was coming there to watch my presentation. So it means a lot. People said that we should not meet our heroes, but I don't agree with that. I'm really glad that you are part of it. So thank you very much as well. The same for Professor Darren. I loved work with you and Professor Forbes. I'm pretty sure that we can conduct a lot of things and publish a lot of good material. Professor Mascarenhas, you was my examination board from my undergrad, for my master's, and for my PhD now. Thank you very much. And I will always remember something that you said to me right when I came back from Canada, because I was kind of depressive because I was used to a different place. So I had to go to your physiology classes. And when I requested for you to participate in your class, since I already made the discipline. You said that a specific thing that it's on my mind, and it's on my mind every day. You said something like, the day that I say no for a student that want to attend my class, I will resign as a professor, because that's what really makes a true professor, a guy that can teach people and being able to accept that different things might happen. And it's always good to know that we have people like you as a professor. I would like to thank my family. They are essential to me, like they always support me. So my mother, my father, my brother, my fiancé. So you guys are everything to me. And I will always remember that third picture. It was my first time at American College. And look who got bigger, Professor Tácito. I tried to find the picture that we took at Denver, but I couldn't find that, just because you look bigger in that picture, but it's a really good one. So thank you very much, everyone here today. Professor Paulo, you taught me a lot with different perspectives. Like I said, I never thought about home-based exercise. And during the pandemic, it was like the best solution ever. So we can keep tracking on sports and workout even at home. So it made me look through another perspective, and I'm really glad for that as well. Thank you for all your contributions. I'm pretty sure I will follow all of them, and let's publish that. Thank you very much.
And so now you are the youngest PhD at Federal University of Paraná.
That's awesome.
Congrats. Congrats. I can say my friend, I can say my son. And that's it. Go ahead and keep working, my friend.
I will do my best, Professor.
Yeah. And of course, it was a pleasure having my Canadian friends here, Stu, Darren, and the Brazilian friends too, Mascarenhas, Bento. And today was a good day, a very good day, special day. Thank you all.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Luis.
Thank you very much, professors. It was an honor to have all of you here today.
Thanks for having me be part of it. It was outstanding. I said to you, Tácito, I'll send you some changes for your document, and you can take a look at those. But well done, fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to a few of those beers in Boston.
Yeah. I will have to give you your present just on American College, so we have to meet there.
Good enough.
Hey, Darren, you'll be there?
I think so. I'm going to try to, yeah, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, let's drink some beers.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks again. Congratulations. Excellent.